239 years ago, some very brave Americans, patriots, came up with the idea of declaring independence against England. Thank goodness for that. Happy Independence Day. This is the Bunker Bob Show. Well, it is a wonderful Independence Day, and I'm glad that you could be with me just for this short show, because today I just want to focus on things that are really important. And the most important thing, obviously, to me, and I think to many of you, is the fact that we live in a free society, in a free nation. And it was because of some dedicated, some true patriots who said that taxation without representation is not a good thing, that we enjoy our independence, that we enjoy the liberty and freedom that so many around the world do not experience. This cannot be something that's overstated, and just because the focus of this program is our city and local community doesn't mean that hearkening back to what's really important, the fact that we live in a free nation, that should never come as ancillary. This is all a part of one great big society, and what makes our society work, in my opinion, is the fact that local communities, as so many have said, that all politics is local. This is what's the most fundamental principle of our freedom and of our liberty. And so today, instead of focusing on issues that are related to the city or the county, I wanted to just simply remind us what happened 239 years ago. That the framers, those who were leading us, that were representatives of the 13 colonies, gathered together in a Continental Congress, not in the Continental Congress. That was after our independence, after we had won the war for our independence. But these many of those who were part of the Continental Congress were the signers of our Declaration of Independence. And that Declaration of Independence was something that I'm really amazed at how few people have ever read and really understand what it means and the purpose of that. So, very simply, today's show, I just want to remind us about that amazing document. And this is what was written 239 years ago and sent to King George. It was very controversial, obviously, because those who signed this document, the Declaration of Independence, they certainly had put their lives on the line, and if we had lost the war, they would have most certainly lost their lives. So this was what was written. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitles them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of governments. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies as places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasion on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such disillusions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for abolishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and to eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their actions of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their county, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrection amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in our most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the leader of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of our circumstances, of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt their connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliance, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. What a beautiful document. What an amazing thing that these signers of the Declaration of Independence did. I think it's important that we remember who they were. And from New Hampshire, there was Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton. Massachusetts, John Hancock, John Adams, Samuel Adams, and Robert Treat Paine. From Rhode Island, Elbridge Gerry, Stephen Hopkins, and William Ellery. Connecticut, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, Oliver Wolcott. From New York, William Floyd, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, and Lewis Morris. From New Jersey, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkins, John Hart, and Adam Clark. From Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, and Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Tyler, James Wilson, and George Ross. From Delaware, Caesar Rodney, George Reed, and Thomas McCain. From Maryland, Samuel Chase, Thomas Stone, William Paca, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. From Virginia, George Wythe, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, and Carter Braxton. And from North Carolina, William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, and John Penn. From South Carolina, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., and Arthur Middleton. From Georgia, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hall, George Walton. These men were patriots. It is no doubt that there will be a day when people will say that they were not patriots at all, that they were people who were undeserving of our respect and admiration. And I'm sure that there will be images that are adorn different government buildings, and the statues of these great men will someday come down because they, in their humanity, fell short of the glory of God, fell short of perfection, and therefore they committed to some an unforgivable crime. May it never be, but unfortunately that is the way of the world as we know it today. As far as this show is concerned, and as far as I'm concerned, these men are great, and they will always be great, and we will never forget the sacrifices that they made for our country. Adding to that have been the amazing men and women who have fought for our country, for the freedom and liberties of our country, to keep us free, to keep us independent, to keep us a people that has transformed the world. So to those of you who have served and fought to protect these freedoms, to protect our liberty, thank you. May we celebrate this remarkable day with fireworks safely, obviously, but remembering that those fireworks represent something. They represent what happened to gain that freedom, that the Declaration of Independence was the first step in a long road to independence. But independence we have, and independence we must remain. I ask that we never forget, and I pray that we won't. It's great to be with you today. Have a very great Independence Day, and we will see you next Monday.